All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a source that presents this really sweeping theory, one that kind of rewrites the entire story of history, resources, and American exceptionalism. And the whole argument is that everything we see happening today, it can all be traced back to a single, powerful root.
So, the source we're diving into today, it really challenges us to just ignore the daily headlines, the easy answers. The whole point here is to peel back all the layers and try to find that one fundamental thing that explains how we got to right here, right now.
And this quote, it just perfectly captures the author's whole approach. They're basically telling us, look, this isn't about politics, it's not about opinion, this is a mechanical breakdown. It's like popping the hood on a car to see how the engine actually works, not just looking at the shiny paint job.
Okay, so what is this root they're talking about? The author lays out their main idea right at the start, and it's the foundation for literally everything else that follows. And boom, here it is, the big idea. The central argument is that the American story is unique, not because of some special ideology, but because it had a massive, one-time inheritance of natural resources that it then burned through at lightning speed. This one idea is the lens we have to look through for everything else we're about to cover.
Now, to really feel the punch of the author's argument, we've got to wrap our heads around this key concept they call civilizational capital. Just think of it as the incredibly slow, painstaking buildup of all human progress. Every tool, every technique, every piece of knowledge, built up layer by painful layer over thousands and thousands of years.
All right, so let's actually see what that slow climb, that slow burn, looked like in practice. The source takes us on this super quick tour of old world history, and you'll see why it's such a huge contrast to what came later.
Our story kicks off way back, 7,000 years ago. The entire population of the planet is just 20 million people. To put that in perspective, that's about the size of Florida today. So at this point, humanity's footprint on the planet is just tiny. Now, the people back then, just as smart as you and me, but their technology is really simple. We're talking stone and mud houses, basic clay pots. Their impact on the planet is next to nothing, and their whole life, their whole existence is completely tied to the whims of the weather.
Okay, now let's do a huge jump forward, 5,000 years all the way to the Roman Empire. The population has absolutely exploded, up to 160 million. We're now talking about large-scale, really complex civilizations.
And according to this source, this is where the resource game totally changes. This, the author says, is a critical turning point. For the first time ever, you see resource depletion actually driving state policy. The Roman conquests weren't just about glory. They were a desperate hunt for new mines, new forests, because the ones back home were starting to run out. And let's jump again, this time to 1500 AD, right on the cusp of contact with the Americas. The Old World's population is now almost 500 million. And sure, their technology is way more advanced, but the continent itself has been mined and farmed and logged for millennia.
And that right there sets up what the author says is the single most important contrast in this entire story. This comparison is everything. On one side of the world, you have a continent with all the easy-to-get resources have been picked over for 7,000 years. And on the other side, a continent that's pretty much a resource blank slate. The author argues this one difference, it changes absolutely everything.
So this huge difference, right? The author claims this creates the perfect setup for a totally unique event in all of human history. The Old World had its slow 7,000-year climb. America was about to have what the source calls a speed run. So here's the formula, right? You take 7,000 years of that Old World civilizational capital, all that knowledge of steelmaking, guns, advanced farming. Now, you apply it to a continent that has 7,000 years of untouched resources. The result? An absolutely explosive 450-year sprint. It's a developmental path that took the Old World millennia, all compressed into just a few centuries, creating an industrial machine so powerful it could supply 2 world wars and then rebuild the entire globe afterward.
But, what happens after a speed run like that? According to the author, this is the point where the consequences of that incredibly rapid consumption start to show up. The bill, as they put it, starts to come due.
The source starts pointing out what it calls red flags. And the first one is the big one we all know about, the oil crisis in 1971. But this is presented not as some geopolitical event, but as the simple, logical outcome of burning through a finite resource at a truly incredible rate. And the argument goes way beyond just fuel. The source claims that the high-grade, easy-to-get copper and iron, the stuff that literally built industrial America, has been largely used up. That makes the fundamental building blocks of our society way more energy-intensive and expensive to get our hands on.
And the evidence keeps coming with this really interesting example. The author points out that America is now a net importer of critical resources. And we're not just talking about oil here. We're talking about stuff you might not even think about, like helium. This is framed as a crystal clear sign that the age of easy domestic abundance is over.
So, it all comes down to this. The author's whole argument really boils down to these two simple parts. First, America was founded on a continent that hadn't been picked over for 7,000 years. And second, its system was perfectly designed to turn that natural wealth into material wealth as fast as humanly possible.
And to really hammer the point home, the author uses this really stark analogy. The cake was the continent's incredible resource wealth. The feast was the 20th century. And the challenges we're facing now in this view are just the long-term health consequences of that completely unrestrained consumption.
And so, in the end, the source material leaves us with this really provocative question. It reframes our current problems not as failures of politics or ideology, but as the hard, physical consequence of a changing material reality. A shift from a world of easy abundance to one where, just like the old world centuries ago, all the easy stuff is gone. And what comes next? Well, that's the question left hanging in the air.